Andrew Benioff here with David Halprin Sensei of the Framingham Aikikai on Tuesday, August 6, 2019, talking about the Aikido Pioneers project. And today we're going to talk about Kanai Mitsunari Sensei and Halprin Sensei's affiliation and history and stories about Kanai Sensei. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Fantastic.
I first practiced Aikido in 1975 because I was going out with a girl whose father was George Leonard, who was a noted writer and representative of the New Age movement at that time, around 1975. He was one of the founders of the Esalen Institute and was part of that California scene. And anyway, I didn't know any of that, but it turned out he was the father of a girl I was going out with, and we would visit him. We were living in New York, but we would visit him in California. He lived in Mill Valley in the Bay Area. And he was practicing at that time at the old Turk Street Dojo, where the instructors were Robert Nadeau, Bill Witt, and Frank Duran. And when I first went to visit him, I think he was preparing for his black belt test, or maybe he had just gotten his black belt. But he was so enthusiastic about Aikido. And so when we got there, he said, "Oh, you've got to try this." And I was like, "Sure," I was on vacation. And he actually had converted his dining room into a little dojo with tatami. And he first taught me how to do a backward fall in his dining room to prepare me for going into San Francisco to the dojo. So we went to the Turk Street Dojo. So I'd practice for like a week or two at a time out there. But I remember the first time I saw Aikido, I just thought it looked so good. I think I had always had some vague idea about being interested in martial arts, but whenever I actually saw a martial art, I didn't feel attracted to it. It didn't, reach me. But when I saw Aikido, I thought, wow, this is really something.
Aikido is, more than anything else, a continuous hard training and disciplining of the body, mind, and senses. At the core of Aikido practice is developing wisdom. In a confrontation, it's essential that you don't behave like a beast, trying only to injure your opponent while protecting yourself. Bugokuro, Budo spirit, is the determination to resolve a confrontation using all of your abilities and wisdom, not just technique. It is critical to realize that Aikido is the expression and embodiment of this Bugokuro. Aikido includes the elements of Bugi, or combat techniques, and considers the real possibility of confrontation. Analyzing a survival situation in terms of the relationship with the opponent leads to discovering the most effective fighting techniques. Paradoxically, continuing to develop this approach leads to a harmonious state, because the perfection of fighting strategies leads to the realization that no matter how strong you are, you can't fight against all existence. This realization is the way to reach harmony, according to the principles of Aikido.
I started in 75, but in my first 2 years of school, I just practiced intermittently. But in 77, it was my last year of school, and I got serious, and I started practicing every day. I remember being out at the Turk Street Dojo and saying, "Oh, well, I'm moving to Cambridge, and I'm going to go to..." Not that I knew him. Kanai Sensei has a dojo there. I heard of him. And they would say, "Oh, that's a very hard style." I was really scared, actually. Anyway, I went, and it was a very hard style. That was at the old New England Aikikai in Central Square in Cambridge. At that time, I thought I was so impressed by him, but he never said anything. He very seldom said anything. And, in the class, he'd do the technique 4 times and say, "Practice." Everybody would do it. You didn't really learn ukemi per se. It was just like you would kind of learn it by the by while you were practicing. So that was like kind of the school of hard knocks in a way. I guess Kanai Sensei had arrived in 1968, and so the people who were the senior students were like his first crop of students, and they were the ones who would teach when he wasn't teaching. So there was Lou Perriello, Fred Newcomb, Fred Wagstaff, Frank Regan, and there's a guy named Al Perez, were like really the old students. The like younger senior students were at that time like Evan Greenland, Steve Carabino, David Farrell. So that was like the next group. No, Kanai Sensei never had an uchideshi, a live-in student. I'm not even sure he believed in it. And then also, like, he always had his office/workshop in the dojo. And I also think, like, I don't think he wanted people around. I think he would be in there working on stuff, like scabbards or swords or drawings. He always had, you know, this shop going on. And he was really into swords, and he could make everything. He could make sword fittings. He could make manuki. You know, he would wrap sword handles. So he was always back there working. So a little bit I felt like he really didn't want to have uchideshi, but there was a group of students who were practicing all the time and were at the dojo a lot. So we didn't have uchideshi, but we had groups of soto deshi that were practicing a lot. And so I think by sometime in 1977 to 1978, I was practicing like every day, or like 5 or 6 days a week. And then I basically continued that, I think, pretty much until I started my own dojo in the year 2000. So that was, 23 years. And then for the next 4 years before Kanai Sensei passed away, I was in both places. So I'd be out in Framingham, but then I would come in several times a week and practice there. And guys from New England Aikikai would go out and cover for me in Framingham, so I could still practice. So it was like, I guess 27 years altogether, but 23 I was there like a lot. Yeah, I traveled with him a lot. I would, oftentimes go with seminars with him, as did other people. And sometimes we'd go in a group, and sometimes it would be 2 of us or 3 of us, and sometimes it was just me. Yeah, I would sort of act as Otomo. Kanai Sensei was very low maintenance. He was very, undemanding. Still, I took it seriously to be like an Otomo. And so I tried to, make sure he was comfortable. And, a lot of times that would involve, translating what he wanted to the people, we're visiting. I think I did a lot of that. I would say, yeah, he was shy, but, he was very, he didn't like imposing on people, almost to a fault. And so I think sometimes it was very helpful to have, a crass American around who would, in a nice way, but just kind of transmit some of the things he would like to do or have happen, or that he needed to them. So yeah, so I did that a lot. Yeah, for a long time I was going to most seminars with him. I was never ordered, or sometimes, maybe once in a while I'd be invited, I think every once in a while he would say, oh, nobody's coming with me on this, can you come? I know that happened with various people, but in general, no, it just happened. A couple of the senior students, who were the younger senior students, like Evan and Steve Carabino, I think said I think I learned early that, if you were serious, that was something you did. Also, I was totally into it, so, it didn't take much. And also, it was so much fun to travel with him, and, you sort of get the red carpet treatment, and you're nobody. You're the Forrest Gump, right? But still, it's you get some good food and some good meals, and so that's nice, and everybody's nice to you. But it was really a great experience, traveling to all these different places, seeing what he taught there as opposed to the dojo, how he presented it, how he reacted to different dojos and different groups, and being able to spend the time and just in a low-key way, just getting his thoughts on different things. I was very happy doing that. I was really into learning Aikido, and I just wanted to learn as much as I could, and I sort of got also a picture from my seniors of what that meant to be sort of practicing seriously. And I am so indebted to to them for communicating that to me, and also for really setting an example about practicing hard. And I think I'm sure I never would have done that if it wasn't for their influence. It was just like a great combination of things. That Kanai Sensei was really like, he was him, and there was a great group of students that were practicing hard and that were serious about Aikido, and that, a lot of information got exchanged. And it was great. It was a great situation. And I basically continued that until at some point there was like a younger group of guys, and then I had children, and the younger guys started going a lot, and then I felt like he didn't need me as much to do it all the time, and I had more demands at home and stuff. So I think then at some point I wasn't traveling as much, but still like a lot. And then the next generation took over. Well, he was powerful in a lot of ways, but certainly his techniques were powerful. He was very kind and tolerant. He was kind to people, anybody he encountered. And that was very characteristic of him. Complex, I think, is another one I would use.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think one meaning is just, that there was a lot going on below the surface, but his whole approach to Aikido was very technical. It was a very complex vision that was certainly by the end of his life, very clearly worked out. And he had a really very clear vision of how he thought Aikido should be and how he wanted to approach it technically and spiritually or emotionally or whatever everything else is besides technically. People who are somewhat familiar with him know it through the relatively extensive system of naming conventions he made about making distinctions between different techniques that were similar but not the same. And that sort of helped people get clear on those things. But his whole view of things was complex. And I guess the other adjective I use would be artistic. Because I think really he approached Aikido really as an art, a martial art, which, he's famous for giving the speech about Aikido as a martial art. But the way he did it was just very artistic, like in the sense that he went to his studio every day and did the work. And he was always like trying new things and changing it and see if he could find some different combination or some different way to do something or a better way. So his work and what he was teaching was always changing, or as he would say, growing. So that things would change. And like one time a student said, "Sensei, did you change that kata or something?" And he said, "No, it's not changing. It's growing." That was really to me, really characteristic of his approach. Just had a lot of integrity too, because it was really about what he was doing. It wasn't about anybody else, or it was about what he was doing. It was very, it was amazing to see. I think it was true of all of that group of Shihan that were our teachers. You had to get them in the right mood before they would talk about like O Sensei or something. But I had a lot of opportunities, so I would, like, when I could, like, ask him about all that stuff, because I was very curious. And I definitely heard enough from him, like, for example, in the case of O Sensei, that I sort of got a picture that was a little bit different from what I read about O Sensei. It would be mostly conveyed through vignettes that he would, stories about O Sensei he would tell, like, or things he would just say, like, offhand, like, it's striking, in the movies of O Sensei, it's all very flowing and everything. And he never looks like he's, like, really, like, pounding anyone. But Kanai Sensei said, and he was different in the dojo, in class. And he would throw them with, like, I think he said, bone-crushing power. So I got this picture that O Sensei was not just a little old man, like a little leprechaun or something like that, but he was, like, badass. And then, of course, when you read about O Sensei in his earlier life, it sounds like he was, So, and from that was the idea that you go through a process. But anyway, that was one sort of picture I got of O Sensei. But also I got the picture that O Sensei was very like unattached to stuff, like ranks. Kanai Sensei told me like he's in the dojo, you know, and O Sensei sees him, and O Sensei says, "Kanai, what rank are you?" And Kanai Sensei says, whatever it was, Shodan, Nidan. So you said Nidan. And O Sensei said, okay, you're Sandan now. That was that. So it presented a picture of someone not attached to a lot of the trappings of things. There was one story about, you know, Kanai Sensei and Shiba Sensei used to get into a lot of trouble for fighting. They would go out and to bad neighborhoods and get into fights to test out Aikido.
Together or separately?
Both. And so a lot of times the police would come to Hambu Dojo to complain about them. And then they would get punished. And the disciplinarians were Doshu, Kishimaru Doshu, and Osawa Sensei, Senior. So they would be the ones that would be punishing him. One day they were punishing him by making him sit in a room by himself and meditate all day. And I just remember one story where he said he's in this room sitting there meditating or whatever, and O Sensei happens to walk through the room. And of course, they're just like traipsing around the place. And O Sensei says, "Kanai, what are you doing?" And he says something to the effect of, I have to sit here and meditate because I was punished for fighting, blah, 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 by Osawa Sensei and Doshu. And he goes, "Oh, that's okay, you can go." And so he just could leave. I thought that was a great story. Another interesting thing that he said about O Sensei was that O Sensei would never get mad at anyone. The only time he would get mad was when he read the newspaper about what was going on, and then he would get really mad and blow up.
Interesting.
Yeah, but he never got mad at anyone. And then just, you know, the other thing, there was this thing going on where a lot of different people would come just to hang with O Sensei and talk with him and visit with him. Like different, you know, spiritual people or artists or philosophers. I don't know, you know, there were some people he mentioned, but, you know, like the Kendo guys. I think that's how he met Haga Sensei, who was a leading Iaido teacher. And I think that's who Kanai Sensei considered his Iaido teacher. But he would meet these guys and just sort of getting the picture of this thing of like, they're just having tea or drinking or stuff. But just that O Sensei had some magnetism or some vibration that was really special, and people wanted to come and just hang with him, just to be there. And also, like, I don't know if he said this or what, but just he had this like noble bearing that was very strong, and that people found really nice and good. And, you know, the Uchideshi would be serving tea or serving drinks. That was their function. So they're just like, you know. Mm-hmm. But it was that kind of picture. And I thought that was just really interesting. So anyway, so through those stories and the little things he would say, I at least got like some impressionistic sense of O Sensei, aside from like what I read in the books. And it was different from what I read in the books. Not that different, but just like a little bit different
More
perspective. Color. Yeah. Other teachers he talked about, of the other older teachers, I definitely got the sense of who he felt closer with and not so close. And
who were some of those?
I think like Doshu, Osawa Sensei, Koichi Tohei Sensei in a certain way, Arikawa Sensei, and then of course the other Uchideshi, Tamura Sensei.
Tamura Sensei was a deshi.
He was the head of the Uchideshi at that time.
Okay.
Yeah. But in terms of his teachers, you know, maybe a little Tada Sensei, some Yamaguchi Sensei, but it seemed like it was mainly Doshu, Osawa Sensei, Arikawa Sensei, go figure. I'm probably leaving someone out. But anyway, I got a sense of which of the teachers he felt closer to. Not that he was like dismissing anyone, but just it was not any in any judgmental way. It was just more like who he felt more proximate to. I'm ashamed to say I don't know more about Kanai Sensei's life outside of Aikido, but I know certain things. Like He was born in Manchuria. His father was in the Japanese army. It was the Japanese occupation. That's where he was born and was a young child. And I also think like he lost his mother at some point. I think later he went to school. He and Shiba Sensei were at school together from middle school. They became friends in middle school. And there's even an old picture of them in their school uniforms, you know. So he went through the school system, and then he worked with the guy who was the curator of the sword museum. He worked with that guy and learned a lot about swords. So he had some contact there, and I think he had some outside jobs. That's really all I knew about his outside life. I think it was both. I mean, I think most people viewing him would view him as very innovative, and I think he was very innovative. But at the same time, I think he thought it was, based on the traditional fundamentals. And I think he thought that Aikido definitely had a very distinct structure and set of principles, and he was very innovative. But I think it was always within that framework that there was an assumption of certain things. Like, he would identify different things as being fundamental, like posture or ma'ai, shikaku. So I think he was very much within the traditional teachings of Aikido. I think within that he was incredibly creative. I think he really moved the art forward quite a bit through his own learning and teaching and understanding it himself. So I think he was both. Well, I think it was kind of all of the above again. He definitely would not say that the country of origin was not relevant. It was definitely relevant. And I think he was very proud that it came out of Japanese culture and definitely embodied some essence of Japanese culture. But I also think he thought that it was not restricted to that. And I never felt from him that there was anything like Japanese people would be better at doing Aikido. And in fact, that was like an idea that people had, especially back in the old days. I don't know if it is now, but and I think even some teachers say that only Japanese people can understand Aikido or something like that. No, he was totally against that. So he definitely thought Aikido was a universal thing that certainly had a Japanese origin and reflected Japanese culture, and especially the good parts of Japanese culture. Mm-hmm. But I also thought that he definitely thought it was something that would go out into the world, and that what happened after that was based on just the quality of the people who were practicing it. And so I always felt he was very, very, internationalistic about Aikido in terms of practicing it. And he was very against the idea that Japanese people had some special ability to do Aikido or could only understand Aikido. Although I'm sure there are parts of it that come, from the cultural parts that are hard to understand, and that, probably that would be a great educational function to articulate some of that stuff. But I think the most important message of Aikido is something that cuts across all people and all countries, and all types of people, and just says, we're all one big family. And so it's sort of antithetical to say that Japanese have some special something about it. So he was very much in that camp. And same thing, he was very good about, he wasn't chauvinistic. He didn't think that only men, that men were better, or he encouraged his women students. He treated everybody alike. The women took ukemi as much as the men did. And so he was very universalist in that way, and I think he thought that message was really important. And he was just that way. He was just like somebody who was very fair and open with people.